The absence of trust will result in the absence of participation, and the absence of participation will result in a failed expedition. This quote comes from my guest today, Robert Martichenko, author and board chair of TrailPath Workplace Solutions, a consulting firm dedicated to building meaningful employment environments. His company was built upon a belief that the journey to meaningful work starts with trust and dignity. In the manufacturing and supply chain sectors where employee turnover is high and employees are choosing to thrive at work rather than simply survive, the way we recruit and retain talent has to change. In today's episode, we will explore the evolving societal and demographic shifts that have inspired Robert's work and what it means to create a meaningful workplace for all. This is E3. Engage and empower with empathy. Welcome to the show, Robert. It's so nice to have you here. For those of you who aren't familiar with how I find guests for this podcast, I do some finding, some people find me, but how I found Robert was actually an interesting story. So we do share a mutual passion for human-centric leadership, and we're both fans of Bob Chapman, the CEO of Barry-Wehmiller, who I just interviewed recently. So we found each other through our mutual following of Bob Chapman, and I'm really happy to have this conversation today. How are you doing, Robert?
I'm doing great, doing really great, and thank you. I've really been looking forward to this. In addition, to my day job, I have the privilege of sitting on the executive board for the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, and Bob Chapman and his team have always been big supporters of the AME. And that's kind of my connection over to Bob, and then Bob's work with his work in his caring culture and the literature that he has put out on this topic. The Everybody Matters book has just been a fantastic read in this whole space of meaningful employment environments as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating because that book was published, like 10 years ago, and it's still so prevalent and it just never ages. And I think, the whole point of that book is I know what his mission was, to really build what he calls disciples and followers. So it's not just a Bob Chapman thing. It becomes a movement and a community. And I feel like I'm starting to feel that community. I'm meeting people like you and all the other people I've interviewed on this podcast. We're all part of that people-centric workplace culture movement. So I'm looking forward to hearing your story, and because I think it's a good one, because you've spent most of your career in supply chain and the lean environment, and you've focused a lot on process improvement. So how does someone involved in that world end up transitioning to consulting on meaningful employment environments? What did that journey look like for you?
If you're in the lean world and if you're in the operational excellence world, you are by nature in the people world, in the respect for people world, because if you really understand lean thinking and operational excellence, you know that it's first about building cultures of respect so people can then grow and thrive and help you to drive continuous improvement inside your organization, recognizing that performance is always required to stay competitive. But if you truly understand lean and OpEx, you understand that it starts with people first. And so for me, it was the 20 years in the supply chain and logistics industry with Lean Core. While we were fundamentally working in transportation and warehousing and material management, we were also building lean cultures in two different ways. We were building a lean culture inside Lean Core, and we were also helping our customers to build lean cultures in that we did training, we did consulting, and we were actually operators as well, managed transportation, running warehouses, and so forth. So Lean Core, my company, had a lot of team members, and we told ourselves when we started building the company in 2005 that if we're going to be selling the essence of lean and operational excellence, we have to live it. We have to. We believed that, and we worked very hard to live the principles, even though at times they're very difficult because it's a lot of work to build true cultures that are focused on people. And Lean Core was primarily about process improvement and supply chain and trucking and warehousing and all of these things. When Lean Core was sold and I was somewhere between unemployed and retired or rethinking the next step, we got a chance to go to some businesses that are owned by friends of mine who are struggling with some workforce instability as measured by turnover, and a lack of participation because trust had already been built because these were close friends of mine. They just came in and said, you know what, just come in and do some work and see if you learned something. And from that, we built the Meaningful Employment Environment Framework. And from that, we have now built a digital platform that's really trying to scale these principles of dignity and meaningful work and trust and meeting people's fundamental needs and creating participative work environments and really truly creating meaningful work.
So tell me a little bit more about that framework. You mentioned you went into your friend's organization, did some discovery work. How did this framework come about?
So just picture people talking to people and just saying things like, I notice you've worked here for 5 years. Why have you stayed? What is it about the employment environment you like? What are things that you don't like? And so there was that discovery work, but then there was also a lot of other research. You mentioned before we started, about reading, and some books are timeless. We went back and looked at books from Maslow and Management from 1965. The one that I've reread now 5 or 6 times, Douglas McGregor, The Human Side of Enterprise, back all the way back to Henry Gant and just incredible authors that have been writing about people in workplace for 100 years. So there was already kind of the literature is there. We did our discovery work, which either created some new ideas or it validated old ideas or it gave us new words for old ideas that were a little modernization of the old ideas. And then we ended up with no less than 50 things. And we just said, that's no good. You can't have 50 things. We have to E equals MC square this thing somehow, and that's where the E equals MC squared turned into meaningful employment environment equals dignity plus meaningful work. Some things cascade from that. So there's a practical implementation plan of what you actually do, but it rolls up to really two things have to be present. One is people have to be treated with dignity and respect for no other reason than they're a human being. And the work has to be meaningful. Because what we learned was we kind of did our lean value stream mapping, but we did it on people this time. And if you watch somebody for 9 hours and you remove breaks and lunch and the odd interaction with a peer or a leader, 76 to 78% of their day is doing the work. So if the work is miserable, so the day will be miserable. You just can't get around that. It's not possible to get around it if 78% of the day was miserable. Secondly, when you look at breaks and lunch and interactions with peers and leaders, if those interactions were dignified, then that will leave somebody feeling like they can grow and thrive. If those interactions are disrespectful and undignified, then people will decline and feel like they're just surviving in the workplace. Then if you're in a position where the interactions are undignified and the work is not meaningful, then that person's not going to last very long. We know they're just going to leave.
That's fascinating to me because I've interviewed people in this podcast in both of those categories. People who really support the trust and dignity component, even, blending into well-being, mental health, and wellness at work. And then I've also talked to people who are very adamant on having purpose driven work. And what you're telling me is you need both. You need both of those ingredients to really have what you're calling a meaningful employment environment.
Yes, and then it's important to know, well, and what if you don't? And so we've introduced what we're calling a decline to thrive status, which is what we've learned in our work is that people are in one of four places. And when I say people, I'm not just talking frontline workers. I mean CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, parents, you and I, and then obviously all other working team members. We are in one of four places, generally speaking, in our workplace. We're either declining, which means we just know that this is not going to work. We're just surviving, which is okay. I've got no joy here, but I have to do this. I've got bills to pay. I've got responsibilities. So I have to do this until something better comes around. Or I'm growing, which is, you know what? I I think this may just work for me. I'm learning and I'm feeling like I'm getting my fundamental needs are met here, or I'm thriving, and that's just look at I don't ever need to go anyplace else. I'm here for forever. This is just I'm going on all cylinders here. So remember that you're either declining, just surviving, growing, or thriving. So then let's go back to dignity and meaningful work and picture two things in four quadrants like an XY matrix. If lack of dignity and lack of meaningful work is down in the lower left, so I have negative dignity, negative meaningful work, then I'm declining. I'm gone. And in many environments, healthcare, hospitality, supply chain, people might just leave it break. Like there's no there's no 2 week notice, exit interview so you can do better next time. They're just not there anymore. Then upper left, where you've got negative meaningful work, but positive dignity. So you're on the positive side of dignity, but the work is not meaningful. Those people are going to be just surviving. They're going to be okay. I can do this because there's one of them is positive. I can do that. I can continue to do this. Down in the bottom right, where you have negative dignity but positive meaningful work, think of the person that likes their job but has a toxic boss, so they stick around because they think they next promotion, the boss goes away, new boss. Okay, but they're just surviving. They're just surviving as well. Upper right quadrant, positive dignity and positive meaningful work. I'm growing and I'm thriving. So when you think about this mathematically, and it's not completely absolute, but just for conversation purposes, there's four quadrants. Only one of them is where I'm growing and thriving. Two of them, I'm just surviving. One, I'm declining. So when you see the Gallup work that's coming out, and when you see our work and others who are doing this work getting thousands of data points, and Gallup in particular, and Sherm comes out with things as well. And you see dramatic numbers like 80% of people are saying they're disengaged at their work. 60% of people say their bosses don't allow them to grow. And you go, how could it be that much? Well, there's only one quadrant of four quadrants where you can actually be growing and thriving. Dignity's got to be there, meaningful work's got to be there.
What do you think is the dynamic that's happening in the workforce right now, and not just in the manufacturing and supply chain environments? Because I'm seeing this everywhere, regardless of industry, this mass burnout of employees. And it seems to be a trend that has happened in the post-pandemic environment. As we all went through the pandemic together, and depending on what our roles were in the workforce at the time, it could have been incredibly difficult or not as much. So we all went through this crazy time together and then emerged, and something changed in companies. It's hard to kind of put my finger on it, but it feels different. And I think employees are sensing that. What is your take? Like, what are the dynamics you're seeing in the sector you serve?
So there's a lot there in that answer, and there's things that we know, facts, if we can actually still talk about facts today, and then there's things that that we know that you're never going to have data to support them because they're just things you have to believe, and then there's things that are just simply my opinion. So let's talk facts. And these are all pre-COVID. COVID, COVID, I think it was Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you get to see who's not wearing a bathing suit. And COVID was just COVID was just the tide going out, and it exposed a lot of things that were already happening. And the first is demographics. When we first started doing this work, and I went into student mode again because I knew nothing about it. I became a student. I am now an amateur demographer, a very amateurist amateur demographer, because you couldn't ignore demographics in this conversation. The fact is that we have a shrinking workforce, which is a function of an aging population and a reduced birth rate of 40 years. And immigration is not being used as a workforce tool. So regardless of all of your views on immigration, one thing we can all agree on, I believe, is it's not being used strategically as a workforce tool. So there's a shrinking workforce, in particular in North America, but it's even worse in parts of Asia because their shrinking birth rates have been happening and their aging population has shifted. It's happening faster. Okay, so less people. Then we've had a shift in the types of jobs, and we've also had a shift in people keeping up. And this is a very contentious conversation, and I get it, and it's a very hard conversation to have. And I fully understand how economics work. But the fact is that we have 160 million people working in the United States, 160 to 165 million people working in the United States. And there is ample data from ample sources that suggests that 40% of that 160 some million people do not make what MIT describes as a minimum livable wage. MIT describes, normalizing for regional differences, about $25 an hour in order just to pay your bills, and that's not even taking into consideration healthcare and savings and those things. So people are just struggling. So we have less people. The people in the workforce that still exist are struggling, and then they're struggling in their personal lives, and then they go into work environments, and the work environments, many of them have done no work to try to make things any better for the person. And when all of these things get put together, then you end up just with changing attitudes. And what happened during the pandemic, when we all kind of came out of it very different people, what that really means is we came out of it with a different attitude, right? You came out of it with is, why am I wasting my life doing this? You came out of it as, like, why would I accept that person talking to me like that? Like I understand that I'm just doing my operational work in the distribution center here, but I don't. Why would they feel that they have the right to talk to me like that? And something happened during the pandemic that gave us all a little more courage to say, I don't need that. And there's jobs. So leave today. That's all right. I'll have another one tomorrow. And we know that's the truth, because as much as the Fed tried to create unemployment by raising interest rates to slow inflation, they didn't create unemployment because there's 5 jobs and only 4 people. And that is not going to change anytime soon.
Yeah. So thinking about this dynamic that you just so eloquently described, how is your work going to help, I don't know, shift the mindset of companies who just haven't adapted to the new attitude of employees? That mindset shift clearly happened with the worker. Now, what about the workplace? Clearly, they haven't caught up. So, how is your work going to kind of bridge that gap?
Well, so there's a bunch here too, and I think we may have I talked about this in a different way when you and I first met, and we were talking about some of the universal questions that we continue to ask. Like, for example, I think we were talking about empathy, and and a universal question, is empathy a character trait, or can it be a learned trait? And can you teach people how to be empathetic? And that's kind of like a universal, timeless question. And one of my universal, timeless questions is, people say that organizations say that people are their greatest resource. And then organizations do things that would suggest people are far from their greatest resource. Organizations will put way more effort into technology and machines and acquisitions and all things business, and not even remotely put that kind of time and investment into people. So the question is if buying a machine and having a factory is a requirement, which it is. If you don't have those things, you can't make a product. So it is a requirement. An executive team can't say, no, we're not going to buy the building. We're not going to buy equipment, because if they say no to that, then they can't build their product. So it is, in fact, a requirement. Why isn't building meaningful employment environments a requirement? Why does it appear to be a preference? A preference being you do it if a particular leader believes in it, is passionate about it. So it's a decision whether you actually do it or not. Where a requirement, there you can't decide not to do it and still have a going concern with your business. And the reason why it's been a preference and not a requirement is because there's been an unfortunate, I'm going to talk in absolutes for a minute, and so please discount my comments, recognizing there's a lot of very good, caring leaders out there. Bob Chapman is an example. But in general, many leaders can think that people are interchangeable, that one nurse is no different than another nurse as long as they have a certificate. A lift truck driver is no different than, so as long as we have warm bodies showing up and enough warm bodies to do the work, then deal with the churn, keep wages as low as you can, and turnover is just a fact of life as long as we get the trucks loaded and get the parts made. So what's going to change that, if anything? There's two things that will change it. The first is for leaders to change their attitude, to go from what Douglas McGregor described as a Theory X leader, a leader who does not trust people, does not believe people want to work, believes people are inherently lazy, so therefore only rewards and punishments will motivate people. Or the type of leaders that what Douglas McGregor calls Theory Y leaders, which is that we believe people are implicitly motivated, we have intrinsic motivation, and I will be motivated if I'm in an environment where I can grow and thrive and be creative and problem solve and use my resources that I bring as an individual, and my individual resources. Okay, so leaders change their attitude, and they decide to build a meaningful employment environment. So they just become really great leaders, or they're great leaders today and they put more time and effort into it. That's one body of work. The other body of work is the organization or the set of leaders that never change their attitude. They're Theory X all the way. So the only thing that's going to change their minds is that trucks actually don't get loaded, parts don't get made. And then they phone down and go, I've got screaming customers. And they say, why do we have screaming customers? The person at the shipping dock says, because nobody showed up today. Nobody wants to work here anymore. And they all have jobs, because there's more jobs than there are people. And we have not built an environment where they want to work. And they're working across the street because that organization invested in building an environment that they want to be in. It's like a very difficult conversation I had with a friend of mine who I love dearly. He was generalizing that young people don't want to work. And I said, that's absolutely not true. I said, they just don't want to work for you. These are two very different things. Just because they don't want to work for you doesn't mean they don't want to work.
That is fascinating. I think the best analogy you could probably use for that is simply you water a plant, right? You have to create that environment to help a seed turn into a seedling and then eventually a plant. And if you're just ignoring it and not providing it the water and the nurturing, then yeah, it's going to die.
And that's a great analogy and metaphor, and because it also connects to the word environment. And we are in our work at TrailPath, and the platform that we built. It's a platform to drive participation and interactions between leaders and team members. It's a platform to provide visibility to how people are feeling. It's about a meaningful employment environment. We very purposely did not use the word culture because, in our humble opinion, culture is way overestimated in how it impacts people's work lives. The environment is much more powerful. There's an old saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I'm sure you've heard that term. Well, the hour to hour, minute to minute environment eats culture like a little snack. So I'll give you a very real example. We could go into an organization and say, what's the culture? And they'll say, oh, well, the culture is entrepreneurial, fast paced, hard working. We make decisions fast. We only need 60% of facts, and then we go. And then we learn as we go. If you listen to that in an interview, you'd be like, man, that sounds wonderful. I want to be part of that, right? Wow. Then you go down to the floor into the factory or the warehouse, and you've got some poor team member trying to load a truck with a scanner that doesn't work, using software that wasn't properly installed, using machines and processes that doing things with processes that aren't documented, no standard work, leaders leading who were the best lift truck driver but got no training on how to be a leader of people. So you go, well, how can that be? Well, it's because you were all about fast decisions, speedy things. Like, picking the right scanners and implementing the right manufacturing software requires discipline. It requires time. It requires experience. It requires research. And maybe those things don't add up to this thing you call culture. So we need to separate culture and what's happening on the ground. And leaders need to care about what's happening on the ground, because I personally do not believe that people leave an organization because of the culture. They leave the organization because of the environment. And we have to learn that these are two very different things.
I love that you made that differentiation. It reminds me a lot of an interview I had with a safety leadership consultant. And he was telling me how oftentimes safety leaders place the blame on the person who used the tool the wrong way, got injured, when they're not looking at the situation, the environment that may have caused the injury. And it's almost always 90% of the time a situation problem and not a people problem. So I think that that really connects well with what you're saying is it's more than just what meets the eye and how the leaders would describe their culture, the messaging that HR has given them. It really is everything you encounter in your day, people and things, tools. So thank you for making that distinction because I think that's an important one that we haven't covered on this podcast yet.
Perfect.
Well, I mean, this has been such a good conversation, Robert. I had so many takeaways from today, but really love how unique your framework is in your model, and absolutely see the need for it in today's workplace environment. I look forward to following your work and seeing how it continues to impact the customers you serve. If people want to reach out to you or learn more about you, where should they go?
Well, thank you for that. So it's TrailPath Workplace Solutions, trailpathws.com. And I'm certainly available for connections on LinkedIn. Rebecca, I'm looking forward to helping you and supporting you in your work, helping organizations understand the aspects of change management and empathy. And there's somebody I remember once, Jim Womack, one of the main thought leaders of the lean movement. He came to LeanCore's office years ago when in the early stages, when I was just a very, very young business owner. And on his way out, he said, "Robert, don't suffer alone. There's a lot of us out there." So I say to you as well, as you're building your business, don't suffer alone. It's a lot of work. And when LeanCore was gone and I was done, it would have been very easy to just go away, I guess, for lack of a better word of saying it. And then another mountain came to me and the team, the core team that helped me to build LeanCore. Who I could have not even remotely done it without them. And now they're part of TrailPath, and it's a mountain. It's hard because we're talking about people, and every single human being is different. And you can't just have brush strokes. You can't say, well, if we do this, then it'll fix this, because you can't. Some people want overtime. Some people don't. Some people want as much as they can get. Some people want 8 hours a week. Some people want flexible job variety. Some people just want to do the same thing. And some people want to be told twice a day what's going on. Some people are fine with once a month. And what our platform is building is a plan for every team member. And this is, to me, the most exciting thing is, instead of designing jobs and then trying to put a person into the job, let's understand the person. And then let's make sure that the work and the job is going to allow that person to grow and thrive, recognizing that everybody's different and recognizing that we change as well. Our needs when we're young and single and don't have a mortgage are very different than our needs when we're married and kids and have a mortgage. And our work environments need to change as well. The good news is that we're seeing, like, we've got organizations that are doing the work. We're seeing the results from a people point of view, which is people are growing and thriving and the people are happier. And then there's the business results too, which is turnover is reduced, productivity is increased, and participation and engagement are increased. So this is just such a win everywhere that we're really hopeful it can scale over the next few years.
Well, I hope so too. It's incredibly rewarding work, and it really moves us away from that business mindset of people are just numbers in a spreadsheet. They're all the same, can be eliminated at any time or brought back in. So really bringing that mentality that humans are unique and special. We're not robots. And I think we need to bring that back to the surface in the workplace environment. Thank you for all the great work you're doing. And I look forward to staying tuned on your progress.
Thank you, Rebecca. My pleasure.
If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please subscribe wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about the Empathy Collective, check out our website, theempathycollective.com. Life is too short. Let's take care of each other at work so that together we can make this world a better place.